For decades, he was the guy on Wall Street, the steady hand, the man who somehow delivered the impossible. Guaranteed returns year after year like clockwork. But behind that curtain of wealth and respectability, Bernie Madoff was running the largest, most devastating Ponzi scheme in history. And then, on a cold December night in 2008, with the whole global economy basically in freefall, his entire 50-year empire just evaporated. It all came crashing down with that one simple confession to his sons. And that's the real question here, isn't it? How did he do it? This isn't just a story about greed. Nope. It's a story about the incredible, seductive power of trust and how easily it can be twisted into a weapon. So let's get into it. To really understand the crime, you first have to understand the man. And Bernie Madoff, well, he wasn't some shadowy outsider. He was the ultimate insider. He spent a lifetime building his reputation brick by painstaking brick. I mean, think about this guy's resume. He started his firm in 1960 with just $5,000 he'd earned from lifeguarding. He then becomes a genuine innovator, a pioneer of the electronic trading that basically runs the market today. And by 1990, he reaches the absolute peak, chairman of the NASDAQ. So, his credibility? It was totally bulletproof. He wasn't just a market legend. He was an advisor to the SEC. Yeah, the very people who were supposed to be policing him. And with that rock-solid reputation, he offered investors the holy grail, a steady, guaranteed 10 to 12% return no matter what the market was doing. So what was the secret? What was this magical strategy that could just defy the laws of financial gravity? Well, what he sold to investors was this incredibly complex work of fiction. The reality was just shockingly simple. This was his secret sauce, the split strike conversion. It sounds brilliant, right? Super sophisticated. And more importantly, it was so complex that basically nobody could understand it. And that was the whole point. When the guy explaining it is the former chairman of the NASDAQ, you kind of just nod and don't ask too many questions. The truth? There was no secret sauce, no strategy, no trades. For over 2 decades, Madoff's investment business didn't buy a single stock. It was the oldest, simplest trick in the book. Take money from person B to pay person A, and just send everyone flawlessly fake statements to make them think they were all getting rich. And he protected this lie with a velvet rope. Madoff turned investing with him into a status symbol. He often targeted these tight-knit communities, making it feel like you were getting into an exclusive club. Just getting in was a privilege. And once you were in, asking for an audit or questioning the returns, it felt rude. It was a fortress of reputation where transparency just couldn't break through. But here's the thing, a fraud this massive doesn't survive in a vacuum. It required a total, catastrophic failure of the systems designed to prevent it. And the truth is, people were screaming that something was deeply wrong, and they were doing it for years. And this is our whistleblower, Harry Markopoulos, a financial analyst and, frankly, a math genius who took one look at Madoff's returns and knew with absolute mathematical certainty that they were impossible. As early as 1999, he laid it all out for the SEC in a memo with a title you literally can't misunderstand. And this is where it gets infuriating. For almost a decade, Markopoulos kept filing these incredibly detailed reports. The SEC supposedly conducted multiple investigations, but they were a joke, totally surface level. They just trusted Bernie. They never once took the simplest step imaginable, calling a third party to verify if the billions in trades he said he was making even existed. Spoiler alert, they didn't. In the end, it wasn't a regulator or a whistleblower who brought Bernie Madoff down. It was the one thing his scheme just couldn't survive: reality. So when the 2008 financial crisis hit, panic just spread like wildfire. Investors, terrified by the collapsing market, wanted their money out, and they wanted it now. Redemption requests started flooding in, totaling an incredible $7 billion. It was a classic run on the bank. But there was no bank. The vault was empty. Of the $65 billion he claimed to be managing, Madoff only had a couple $100 million left. He couldn't pay. The music had finally stopped. So he gathered his sons, Mark and Andrew, in his apartment and just told them everything. And to their immense credit, they didn't hesitate. They walked out and immediately called the FBI. You know, the headlines all focused on these shocking numbers, the billions of dollars. But the real story of this fraud is written in the lives it absolutely destroyed. This wasn't just about some Wall Street gamblers. It was about charities, foundations, and ordinary people's retirements just vanishing overnight. For his crimes, Bernie Madoff received the maximum possible sentence, 150 years in federal prison. It was a symbolic number, really, meant to reflect a lifetime of destruction. And the fallout extended far, far beyond money. The shame and horror were just immense. 2 years to the day after his father's confession, Madoff's son, Mark, took his own life. Bernie himself would die behind bars in 2021, leaving a legacy of nothing but absolute ruin. But there is one surprising bright spot in this whole mess. The court-appointed trustee, a guy named Irving Pitchard, led this relentless effort to claw back money. By suing the early investors and feeder funds who had profited, he actually managed to recover a staggering $14.4 billion. That's about 75% of the actual money people lost. And ultimately, this disaster forced some real change. The SEC created an Office of the Whistleblower, specifically to make sure the next Harry Markopolos actually gets heard. And new rules now require that assets be verified by independent third parties, which makes a fraud on this scale way, way harder to pull off. And I think that's the ultimate lesson here. Madoff's greatest weapon wasn't some complex strategy. It was his suit, his title, his sterling reputation. He proved that our desire for safety and certainty can make us dangerously blind. And it really leaves us with a critical question. When we're faced with promises that sound too good to be true today, who are we trusting? And are we absolutely sure they deserve it?